Hi and welcome to the third tutorial in the underwater series. So let's place some rocks. First thing I want to do is I want to append some rocks from the assets file I made, this rocks blend in here, and I'm going to start with the bedrock. And if we go and find our rocks, they're in here somewhere, chaps, so I know they are. There they are. See, I knew they were there. So we'll go and bring these rocks towards us a bit so we can see them easily. Obviously they're like way too big. I mean, some of these bits of bedrock are bigger than the cave, so we're going to have to scale them down. That's no big hardship. So we'll select all three of them, scale them down, make sure they fit in our cave. And we'll move them into our cave so we can see them as we're playing around with them. We'll go to view camera. Right. And now what we can do is we can start copying these, we can start moving them about, we can do what we want to them. And this is the kind of wedge shaped piece that I made. That's the square piece. And this, I think, this square piece here, let's move that off to one side for the moment. This square piece here, I'm actually going to, if I can select it, I'm actually going to move be quite near the camera. I'll press G for grab and Y to restrict its movement. I'm going to put it somewhere like that. I'm going to drop it down a bit actually. G, Y. I'll put it somewhere like that. I'm going to rotate it slightly because the thing with bedrock is it's never ever quite flat. It's nearly always got some kind of fault to it. So that's the first bit of bedrock. It said bedrock, but it's close. And then this piece, shift over like that. I'm going to rotate it like so. And what does that look like from the camera? Down a bit more. GY. The reason why I'm using GY for the Y movement is because Y is in towards the camera. It's notoriously difficult to actually make it do that. And here's our very square lump of bedrock, as you can see. I'm trying to wonder where to use that. In fact, whether to use it. I think I am going to use it, but I'm going to use it outside. So, if I view top, let's take it outside. View camera. drop it down. I'm going to rotate it like something like that. And we start to see we're getting a bit of variation in the ground, which is really what we want. And now what I want is because all of the jagged bits of rock are going to be rocks that have fallen off the cave. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, shall I do it that way? Yeah, so I'll make a plane and I'm going to drop the rocks off the plane. That's probably going to be the best way to do it. So view top, add a plane. I'm going to make the plane the same size as the cave, or very nearly so. Like so. And now I'm going to bring in the other rocks that we had, which are those jagged rocks. I'm going to bring those in. So it's going to be file, append, and this is the sharp rocks. Right, so I can select all those, and this is something don't think I've shown you before. Select pattern, and because I know they're all going to be called shrocks underscore, I'm going to go select pattern, click in there, shrocks, and there's nothing else called shrocks, so I hit enter, and it's selected all the things called shrocks. Right, now move all these out of the way, which is what I wanted to do. Scale it all down a bit. That'll do. Go back to view camera. And now what I want to do is I want to distribute these rocks on this plane. So I'm going to use a particle system to do that, and this is this plane, the one that's over the top of everything else, which at the moment seems a little mad. I don't want 1,000 of them, maybe 500 will do. Start one, end one, and for the moment physics no. Don't know about size, we'll see what they look like. Group, pick random, and it's the sharp rocks we want on there. And the size we're going to take up a bit. And the physics, there's going to be no physics. That's right, no physics. Render emitter, don't care because it's going to get deleted in a minute. What I want to know is why we can't see a particle system on there. Oh, it's it's because we're not at 0. That's better. Obviously a lot too big. So something like that would do. And we can reduce the size of this plane, I think, because we don't want stuff dropping outside the walls. So reduce that size there, and I can bring it forward a bit. Maybe we'll have a few more than that, and we'll have some random on the sizing, quite a lot of random on the sizing. We'll boost the size up a bit, like so. And the next thing I want to do is I want to turn this plane into an obstacle. So we'll make that a collision object, and this is the sandy bottom here. We're going to make it into a collision object, and I'll show you why that is in a moment. So right, that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to go and I'm going to convert that particle system into real rocks. There you go, that's converted. Okay, now while they're all selected like that, we're going to go and in the physics tab down here, we're going to add active, and I'm not going to worry about mass or anything else. And with this physics, with this plane here, I'm going to add passive. And I can now delete this plane. He said, try and select the plane. This is one thing that's irritating me about the current Blender. It seems to not want to select things very well. Right. Now, what's going to happen now if I press play? So those rocks are going to drop. Ooh. And they're dropping all the way through the plane. That shouldn't happen. Why is that? Because I have it set as convex hull and not mesh. Let's try that again. And we'll let them sort themselves out a minute. That'll do. And this is quite a good way of distributing objects on the ground. Is just to throw them on the ground. Why the heck not? Right, now what I want to do is I want to get rid of, this is why I moved it. I knew I was going to want to get rid of our originals. So I'm going to hit A to deselect everything, B to box. I'm going to box select all of those. I'm going to shift click the lamp so that's not selected. I'm going to hit X. I'm going to delete those originals. Now all we've got are the rocks that are in there, and I can shift those around manually quite easily. But before I do that, obviously I want to reselect all these rocks items, which is why I got rid of the other ones. And as you can see, it's remembered what we had, so I just hit return, and if I hit apply transformation, and what that should have done is literally applied the transformation. And remove. So now these objects are just objects and there's no physics applied to them, and they're just sitting there. So if I go to view camera, you can see we've got all these objects hanging around, and we can delete them, we can move them around, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in a moment. But I wanted to show you that way of distributing items. Okay, and this is kind of pre-distributed them before I go and move them around. So I'm going to move them about. I'm going to pile some up over here. This distribution at the moment is a little too even for me. So I'm sure you can figure out how to move rocks around by yourself. So I'm going to pause it while I do that and then bring you back. So there you are, that's those rocks. I've piled a lot of them up around here. I've left some of them distributed around the place, and I've just made it uneven because these rocks would have actually fallen from the roof of this cave. That's the idea anyway. So now we want to add in the smooth rocks that we had, and so I need to bring those in. That's append. Let's find where they are. Here we go. Once again, they're much too big, which was kind of expected. And scale them down. Bring them into the cave so we can see to work on them. View camera. Wow, floating rocks. Very good. And GY. It's still too big. Scale them down. And these sort of rocks you often find are actually in places on top of bedrock. So we're going to put them literally on top of our bedrock in places, not always, but sometimes. And these rocks I want to be quite large and in the foreground. Well, maybe not that large, eh? Scale that down, drop it, and we'll rotate it. This is the long one. And what I want to do with this long one, I want to use it as like a pointer, and I'm going to put it over there actually. Let's move this one. But as I was saying before, this new version of Blender 7.1, for some reason the selection mechanism doesn't seem to work very well compared to the older versions. And it's quite difficult if you've got one thing in front of another. It's quite difficult to select the piece that you actually want. Right, so let's scale that up somewhat and move it in, because this kind of points into our scene. It's quite an important piece of the composition, really. Scale it up a bit further, move it over a bit. Okay, and where are we going to put this beastie here? Actually, that can do the same as this, but from the other side. And I'm determined to use all my rocks, you see. Although maybe I needn't, but I want to use them because I've made them. Now I'm going to use them, whether they're needed or not. I'm going to use them. So do something like that, and this one can go over here. I'm going to scale it up. I'm going to rotate it a little. And don't forget, we're still going to have to play with these materials, because we're going to have to get them to look right when the water is on them. And that could be a bit of a challenge. But then, we like a challenge, don't we? Right. So that's that. Now, I'm going to take some of these rocks, I'm going to copy them outside, because this area here looks quite monotonous. So I'm going to take the smooth rocks that we just imported, and if I go to tools, duplicate, escape, and move them out here. And I've not quite moved them enough. I need to go further out there. And now they're under now they're underneath the ground, which is no good at all, obviously. View camera. And then one by one, we're going to find places to put them. You see what I mean? I'm having trouble here selecting things. It's always selecting something. See, I'm right the way over here, but it was selecting the actual lamp, which is no good to me at all, really. If I view top, this one I'm going to bring in here somewhere. That one. Right, so if I one by one, view selected, and we can see where we become, you know, with reference to the ground, and now you can see we've hit the ground. So what we want to make sure is we haven't got statues, so that make sure that our rocks aren't hovering. So there. View selected. Drop it down until it hits, which is there. Drop it down until it hits, which is there. And then some of these we might want to scale. But let's have a look first. And we can see this one needs rotating because it's not really aligned with the ground surface very well. So we'll rotate that. We'll scale it up slightly. I'm going to move it to the right, because then we've created this kind of interesting sort of negative shape here, which is good. So here's a piece of composition you're learning about now. Negative shapes. We've got these negative shapes. And here we have this stone here, which is one of the internal ones, but I think it's in the wrong place. It wants to come forward. It wants to drop down in size quite a lot. And it wants to not be hovering. It still wants to go down in size. You see, I want to keep that negative space there. So G, Y. And that'll do, I think, for that. That stone there, I think, wants to move off here somewhere like that. And that, I think, will be a lot better. Let's render that. And remember, it's not the materials we're looking at the moment, or the lighting, so much as the shapes. The shapes and where the shapes are, and does it look quite interesting? Does it look interestingly random? And yeah, that looks reasonable. This rock here is a bit too round, so we want to drop that down like so, so that it's actually embedded in the earth. Jolly good. That's a bit better. Right. And now we want to start putting some weed in. And I'm going to start placing the weed and the first weed that I'm going to place is actually, funnily enough, going to be the one from the earlier demonstration. It's going to be the hair type weed, and in order to do that I need to hide this cave. I need to hide the cave roof here, so it's still called a cylinder, which is naughty of me. Should be called a cave. It's better. Now it's easier to find. And if I click that, bang, that's gone. temporarily. It'll still render, you just can't see it. Right. And the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to see where these gaps were. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a bit of white painting. So here we go, I've selected the landscape here. And I'm going to go into white paint mode. Whoops. I'm going to hit Ctrl Z to get rid of that, which I've just accidentally white painted. And we want the add brush, and we don't want it quite that big, so we'll take the radius down. We want the strength very high, okay, because I'm actually going to use it for placing this weed, this hair type weed, and the hair type weed is going to be partly in the background, so I'm going to have some around here and some in these rocky areas here, and maybe a bit there. I don't want too much of it in the foreground. In fact, I don't want any of it in the foreground at all. I'll have some of it around the back of this rock. Maybe a few patches out here. Like that. That might very well do. So, we now find that we will have a new vertex group, because we've just created, by doing that white paint, we've just created a new vertex group. I'm just going to call that weed hair to remind me what type of weed it is. So now I'm going to hit the particles button. Having done that, new particle system, as you can see at the moment they're all over the place, and in order to change that we go to vertex groups where it says density, weed hair, and in a moment when we go back to frame 1, because all of these things are generated at frame 1, you'll see what we've got, and we certainly haven't got 1,000 of them. So we want random, we want vertices, lifetime of longer than the animation anyway, and it's a hair, and the length doesn't want to be 4. How long do we want our pieces of weed? If we go and view the camera, you can see what we've got. Drop, 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 like so. Now the thing is that we haven't got enough vertices there to actually show us what we want, so let's start playing with this number until we've got that. Will probably do actually, because what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to use children. Okay, so we want to go to the material, which at the moment is this one called Sandy. We want to add a new material, and it's going to be green for our weed. It's going to be quite a dark green. Specular is going to be a lighter green, actually a much lighter green. Reasonable intensity, going to have some translucency to it, and what we want is strand render. I'm going to make the root 4, the tip 1, width fade I'm going to put up to sort of 1.2ish, and I think that's all we need. So we'll go back into our particle settings, and material slot used for rendering, well, material, let's call it weed, hair weed or something like that, just so we know exactly what it is that we're doing. So that's that. We're still going to render the emitter because we want to see the sandy bottom, and we want a strand render. Hair dynamics we want to be on. We want to turn the spring right the way down like we did before for the cloth simulator, and bending likewise 0.1. The segments on here I had turned up to 9, I think, from my previous one. Now we want children, simple. We don't want 100 of them, we want something like 20, I would have thought. You can see what we've got there is a fair old forest of weed in these areas where we have weed, which is kind of what we want, really. I think it's time to turn the cave back on so we can see what we can see. So there we go, and we're going to make them clump, which just kind of changes the shape a bit, and we'll give it a bit of roughness, not that much roughness, a little bit of roughness. And a bit of random size, not a lot. A little bit of random rough. And this is the radius of the children around the parent. Now, as you can see, we can make these grow. But unfortunately, they grow in 3 dimensions. So it's not a good idea to set that very high. And in fact you don't really want to anyway. And now let's have a play with the number of actual parents we have, and we want the least number with getting a good effect. So you can see we're still getting a good effect all the way down here. Kind of, I think, about there. I want to make my weed a little bit longer. How's that? Like so. Right. So now we've got the field weights, and we want minus 0.05, which is about what we had before, and 5 times the wind force, if you remember. Then I'm going to hit this, come back into object mode, and it looks like that at the moment, but don't worry, it won't look like that at all, because there's a lot of things that you're not seeing at the moment without it being rendered. And if I render that, you'll see where the sun hits it, it's really bright, and that's going to tone down a lot. It's going to tone down a lot with the addition of water. And this is some of the art of doing this sort of thing. You need to kind of remember that all the colours are going to change when you add the water, and you're going to have to play with the materials to get it to look right. Now the next thing I need to do, I need to add in the force field that we had from the weed. Do you remember the weed earlier? So I'm on to File, Append. Well, I don't want the rock file, I want Seaweed. Whoops. 1, 2 file, and I want objects, and what I want is that field object, and that will come in complete with all of its data. And if I go up here, make sure I've got that selected. Gosh. Okay, so we're much too big as I would have expected. Scale it down, and we want it pointing. We do actually want it pointing in this direction because we want water coming in and out of the cave. However, kind of that way really, and slightly at an angle, otherwise it's not going to be very interesting. And it needs to be fairly flat, like so. So now if I hit play, you see that all our weed has immediately just flopped over and gone mad. And there's two reasons for that. One is the whole scale of the thing is off, so I need to scale this back down again. And because we've got the weed a different length from what I had it set at to begin with, then I need to play around with this. Probably actually an effect of 1 would be fine, or maybe even less than 1. And there you go. I want more segments. And it stopped because it didn't start from 1. This is this whole Blender starting from frame 1 business. So there we go, you can see the weed is moving around quite nicely now. Still actually is a bit strong, so I'm going to go 0.5 on the wind effect. And that's a lot better. Now, I think at the moment our weed is rather too translucent. So let's go and change that. Maybe down to 0.2-ish or something like that. That's a bit better. That's quite a lot better actually. So maybe our specular intensity is a bit too high as well. We need to play around with the colours, everything else, and maybe put a bit of a texture on there to create some make it near black, still a green. but near black. Give it a bit of an effect on the normal. That's kind of looking a bit better than it was. But then, as I said, it's pointless spending too much time playing around with the materials, because as soon as we add the water, it's all going to be different. So let's add in some more weed. Right, I've just gone back to the seaweed again, because what I've done here, all I've done is I've created these planes which have got some seaweed distributed on them, and this is how I'm going to place the seaweed in the actual final scene. Now, as you can see, that I've used white paint on here, and the plane has been divided up so that I could use white paint, and I've just distributed the weed that I made earlier, and I've done a similar thing on here, except I haven't white painted it, and on here the other type of weed. So I've got a large bed, I've got a small clump of this green weed and a small clump of the brownish coloured weed that I made. And as you can see, it all animates quite nicely. Right, so now I'm going to go back to our original tutorial, and I'm going to place these. So the first thing I need to do is I need to import them. So I'm going to append them, and they're in Assets, Seaweed Blend, whoops, click too many times there, Object, and as you can see I've named them Greenweed Bed, Greenweed Clump and Brownweed Clump. So let's bring in the Greenweed Bed first, and we'll place that. Now we might want more than one of these, but before we do that, because they're going to be huge, they're going to need scaling down. And not just that, there's a little problem when you use particle systems and then you rescale them, and that is that the particle system doesn't scale when the object scales that you put it on. Not very good. So if I scale this down, you can see that the weeds are still huge. So what you need to do is you need to go into the actual object and the particle system, which, don't forget, it's imported with it, and you need to change the size, which at the moment is 0.78, and that wants to come down to quite a lot lower actually, because I'm going to scale that down even further. But yeah, so scale it down again, and as you can see, it's all, the particle system works totally independently. And now sometimes that works for you, sometimes it works against you. And the other thing we need to do is to make sure that its movement is synchronized with the direction of our current. So we're going to have to rotate it as well in a minute, but first of all I'm going to look at it and we'll see which direction it's moving in. You can see it's moving in that direction, so the current should be coming from this end to there. So I need to rotate this like that, and then everything will be going in the right sort of direction, which is good. And don't forget, we were going to have a 400 frame long animation, and we said that when we were making these weeds, so that's what I've just done. I've just changed our animation to that long. Right, now where to put these weeds? The thing is, you can have them growing up through the rocks. It doesn't actually matter. Yeah, technically it's wrong, but the eye will never actually notice it. And we want to bury the plane underneath. So I think these weeds are going to go here, sort of like that. If I go via camera, you can see there they are. And I might want to make them a little taller, not a lot, just a little bit. So I'm going to change the size. Something like that would be good, and we can still see that stone there. And how does that look when it moves with the rest of the weeds? Well, so you can see. Now I'm going to put some more of these weeds outside the cave, just sort of beyond the pillar there. So rather than play around with the scale and rotation and everything, I'm just going to copy what I've already done. So I'm going to go down here, duplicate, hit the escape key so I know it's on the same level roughly, and just move it around until it seems to be in the right place. So if I can do that from this angle. Let's try GY. And that's in the right place geographically. So I'll look at the camera. You see, it starts to look quite good when you've got more than one type of weed. That's going to go there like that. And in fact I'm going to duplicate that again, hit the escape key, I'm going to move that over here, I'm going to send that behind these weeds here. So GY, somewhere there like that, and drop it down, and that means that this one was actually incorrect. I want to make that go further into the background. GY, like so. And that's the first of our sets of weeds. Now I want somewhere in the foreground here, I want a clump of, this is why I did the small clump, I want a clump of the green, and I want probably two clumps of the brown, one over here and one over here. You'll notice that I'm keeping this centre quite clear of weed, and that's because that's lets us see the fish swim across. I might even get rid of those, I don't know, I'm not sure yet. We'll see what it looks like when we get around to doing the final materials. So, file, append, and it remembers where you were, which is good. This time we want greenweed clump. I don't really know where it's put that, so it's all the way over there. Not cool. And we want it inside the cave, and we're going to scale it down. View camera. As you can see, got enormous weeds inside our cave now. And you can make use of this size if you want, because it would actually, oops, Control Z that, it would actually make it greenwood clump, that one. It would actually make it look as if it was a different type of weed, but that's not the effect that we want, so that's not what we're going to do. As you can see, we're just playing around with it until we get it the way that we actually want it. And we might only want it very small. Who's to say that we haven't just got a very small clump of weed there like that? And that in fact looks quite good, and it does look like another type of weed really. So we now need to do the same rotation, I think, as we did before. Let's double check this. Which way is the... Yeah, we need to do the same sort of rotation as we did before. So we need to rotate it around somewhere like that, about 90 degrees. And let's just position it in a slightly more logical place. Like so. And like so. And that points out that these rocks aren't very well positioned because they're up in the air somewhere. So I want G, Y, let's just move that back and down. That one wants to go down, that one wants to go down, down. And this whole problem with rocks being up in the air and things like that, this is just something that with a bit of practice that you find you can spot. These all need doing actually, I think. Some of them you can leave, some of the ones in the background obviously you can leave. GY. Others you're going to have to just play with. I don't actually like that rock there. Don't like the shape of it very much. Let's just turn it over a bit and maybe bury it. Put it somewhere where it's good, somewhere like that. And we'll probably find we've got the same problem with these other rocks yet. This is kind of an iterative process, just finding these things that are wrong with your scene and fixing them. Don't be afraid to delete things if they don't work. I think having a rock in front of there would be good. That's better. Don't like that rock. Not where it is anyway. See, we've got a subsurface rock here. Maybe put that there, something like that. Let's just make sure there's no obvious floaty rocks. Maybe that one. See, the thing is, when you do the final renders, you're going to be able to tell probably by the shadows whether they're on the deck or not. Definitely that one. How about him? Is that okay? And I might want to put some rocks out there actually, but they'll be these type of smooth rocks. In fact, I think I'm going to do that now. I might actually put one of these pieces of bedrock out there. That'd be quite good. So I'm going to duplicate that one. Hit escape. Start moving it around. And let's do a bit of rotating. There we are. As you can see, we're starting to get a bit of a sense of depth in here. And we've got some different types of weed. I want to put another clump of that green weed over here in the shadows. Let's just do that now. I'm going to copy that one. Hit escape. Let's move it over here. But we want it somewhere we can see it. So I need to do it from the camera point of view, really. And GY. So there we go. Now, just to contrast with all this greeny stuff, we've got some brown weed, obviously. So I'm going to put in a couple of clumps of that, and just a couple of clumps will do fine. There we go. Now remember, when I come to render this in a minute, just to do a trial render, these materials are absolutely nothing like what is eventually going to be used, and the reason for this is the water. Because the water changes absolutely everything. It's going to change the lighting, not the direction of it, but the strength and possibly the colour, and it's also going to change the actual materials that we're using here. As you can see, we've got a giant monster triffid. Let's get rid of that. We'll go brown weed, scale it down. I mean, you might want some weed that big. I don't know. I don't, but you might. You might think, gosh, that's a really good huge monster triffid look, and I want it. It's entirely up to you, you know. Same way as where the weed starts. I mean, there's the plane, but there's nothing to say you can't have it down there. It might look a bit strange with the weed going through the grass, but hey, I'm not going to rain on your parade and say no, you can't have it. I'm going to tell you yes, you can have it. Right, GY. Let's pull it over here, down here in front of these rocks here. Drop drop it down a bit so the plane it's on disappears, and there you have one clump of brown weed. Now obviously I'm probably going to have to rotate it. Let's just have a look and see where it goes. Yeah, I'm going to have to rotate it, so excuse me a minute. That means rotating the same 90 degrees or so as the others. Like so. Now I've kept that low there, but what I might do is, and also to illustrate something else to you, what I might do is put another clump over here, but make it quite tall, make it quite large, and put it in front of this rock. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to duplicate it again, hit escape, and move it across. At the moment I don't think it's quite far enough in the Y, so G, Y, oops, something like that. And let's scale the size of this weed up, and you see if I do that, that changes as well. And this is what I wanted to show you. So I want to scale this up but not scale that up, so that means that it has to be made single user, and what has to be made single user is object and data. Selected object there, and now when I change this, they're still both growing. Okay. Didn't happen when I tried it, honestly. Let's try again. Make single user object data materials and texture this time. We'll check on there, 0.08. Now it doesn't want to select it, you see. How nice, 0.08. Aha, the reason is particle system. Particle system settings. Now we're on particle system settings 03. I knew there's something I forgot. So now we can change the size of this and make it larger, and the other one doesn't get affected, like so. And in fact I'm going to scale the actual base to make it smaller and bring everything in. It's going to be a very dense clump of weed now, and we can bring it a bit closer towards us. And view camera, I'm going to move it over, and it gives the fish something to go behind, so fish can go behind that and come out there and all this sort of thing. It all helps with the realism of the scene. And talking of realism, I'm going to do a trial render now, but please don't laugh because it won't look anything like what the final image will. As you can see, it's starting to take a bit of a longer time to actually render, and that's what we've got. And what I'm looking at is shapes. Do the shapes look right? And the answer is yeah, they all look right, apart from this damn weed that I put in here. The procedural weed, the hair type weed, that doesn't look right at all. So let's do a bit of changing on there. So we've got the landscape selected. This is our hair material. We've got number of hair segments 11. I'm going to take that up to a little bit. How many degrees does it have to curve? Well, we've said 3 degrees, I'm going to say now, before it makes another segment. Actually, I'm going to take it down from there too. I'm going to take the number of children up a bit to make those clumps a bit clumpier. I could give it all maybe a bit of a braid, an amplitude of nearly nothing, or a curl maybe, radial. It's just a question of doing what looks right. Maybe I want to clump that. That brings the ends together. Let's render that and see what that looks like. See if that looks any better. Yes, that looks much better. You can see we've got a much more gradual bend on these weeds now. And let's go somewhere in the middle where they'll be waving about and re-render again. And have a look and see what that's like. Jolly good. So I'm going to say that's it for the moment for that. I'm just going to add in the water. And the next one will all be about changing the materials. Actually it won't, no, it's going to be about fish, the next one. So I'm just going to add in the water, and then that will be it for this particular tutorial. Okay, so all the water is a cube, and we're going to give it a volume material. So let's add in first of all our cube and bring it up. Now the important thing is that the camera can't see the edges of it, but we don't want it so huge that it's like the size of the known universe. So what we do is we just take this cube and edit it from the camera's point of view. So if I go into edit mode now, I'm going to go into edge select, which is that one. Select just that edge, view camera, and I want to change the, let's see, what is our cube? Cube 004. I'm going to change its name to water. Whoops. Now, for the moment, just temporarily, I'm going to change the maximum display to wireframe, which will let us see what we're doing. And I can see that that wants to go out to maybe about there, and then I'm going to recede it into the distance along, well, you see what I mean, that's sort of general line. And oh dear, Ubuntu has experienced an error, but never mind. I'll just get rid of that, because it won't be anything serious. Never is. So let's have a look from the top. We can see we want this to be sort of right away in the distance somewhere, like that. And we're going to kind of fade it out, fade everything out, so maybe there. Then that particular edge there, we go back to camera, view camera, we can see that particular edge wants to go somewhere about there. And this just gives us a line, if you like. So we know by extending that line, our other edge wants to be around about there. we can see that we can do that, and we can do that. Now if I go into view camera, we shouldn't be able to see any edges, which we can't, which is great. And what I can do now is I can actually turn off. I'm going to turn off the wireframe because otherwise we'll forget it's there. It's going to be in solid. And I'm going to go down to W for water. Wherever the heck that is. There's a lot of weeds, water. There we go. And I'm going to turn off the display. Just in the display that I'm turning off is just literally, oops, I can't do that until we go into object mode. There we go, object mode. I'm going to turn off the display just in the actual 3D viewport. Now I'm going to add in the material for our water, and it wants to be a very transparent volumetric material. So it's new. Surprise, surprise, I'm going to call it water. Now I could copy this from another one, but then you wouldn't learn anything, so I'm not going to do that. So our colour scheme can be blue or green. Got a lot of green in there at the moment. I'm going to go for sort of like a bluey marine type green, something like that. Wants to be darker. Okay, and that'll just be the basic colour. Specular is going to turn right the way down. It's volume. Oh, sorry. I should have changed this on here. It's a volume material, and our transmission colour is going to be that green that I had earlier, like so. Reflection colour is going to be a similar green but a lot lighter, like so. Emission, if it gets used, I'm not sure if we'll use it yet, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, it'll be the similar colour to the reflection colour. Now density scale 0.05, you can see what that's done immediately. You can hardly see it. So now if we render that, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the sort of hills in the black background to sort of start to disappear like that, and you can kind of see that immediately you've got this sort of underwater feel to it. I don't know what's going on there, I must admit. I think that must be the edge of the cube, so I need to make this cube deeper. Which means I need to turn it on again so I can see it. There we go. Yeah, what we're seeing is this thing here. So I am actually going to have to make this cube somewhat deeper. Doesn't make much difference, but hey. What that's going to mean is I'm probably going to have to raise that end edge as well, because it will no longer be obscured by the cave mouth. So this edge is going to have to come up like that. So let's try again. View camera. Oops, you can see it's not far forward enough towards the camera. So let's do this again. Move this forward. View camera. Render image. I did this once and I forgot to cover everything, and like it was really weird because the fishes were swimming in and out of the cube, and it looked really strange because they kind of flashed on brightly and flashed off again. And that's looking a lot better. We need a bit more light in the cave. We need that end of the cube there to move to the right, otherwise we're going to have this bright artifact there. So here we go again. Oops. Show hide render view. View top. View camera. Render image. And we should have got rid of that bright spot down there. As indeed we have. So there we go. So now we've got the water on, and we just need to get some fish in, and we need to tiddle about with the material. You'll see that automatically you've got this nice sort of volumetric effect going on in the distance. Yeah, quite proud of that. In fact, if I turn the lighting up, that might be all it needs, because we didn't do too badly with the other materials. So let's try just turning the lighting up. You never know, we might short circuit a lot of work for ourselves. So I'm going to take that up to 40. Render image again. See what we get. And I'm going to change the soft size of it up to 4. Number of samples. This is the shadow section, obviously. Number of samples to 9. And you can see what difference that will make now, as suddenly the shadows get a lot more realistic. Starting to quite like that. Now, what we might want is to introduce a bit of emission into our scene. Let's just edit the front here and bring that down actually, so it goes below the seafloor. So I noticed that was a bit of a problem earlier. And let's introduce a little bit of emission, not a lot, 0.08 or something. And that might help to brighten the whole thing up a bit. And there you go. I don't think we're going to need to do much with the materials actually, because you can see everything really. Might want to add a bit of extra light in the cave, but I'll leave that for the next tutorial. So thanks very much, and we'll be doing fish on the next one. Please like and subscribe and do all those good things.